President Donald Trump and his business dealings are profiting from him being in the White House. BurtonGetty Images An important but overlooked element of the Trump presidency is that he's actively profiting while in office. The president has many business dealings which continue to earn him money in violation of the Constitution. He's refused to divest, and the lawsuits have poured in. President Donald Trump has been stapled to the news headlines for more than 2 straight years now. While he's had his victories, most of the news and analysis surrounding his candidacy and administration hasn't been positive. However, there's been scandal after scandal, legislative failings, and social media firestorms. Given the man's history with the law and numerous shady business dealings, it shouldn't be much of a surprise to anybody. But as most people have focused on the bigger, IER scandals surrounding the Trump administration, Russia, mostly smaller, but equally robust issues plague the president. Specifically, there's a big issue concerning Trump's businesses and his holding power as president. The big issue: Trump is actively profiting from the presidency, which is something that the framers never intended. Though he promised to divest himself from his business interests while in office, Trump hasn't done so. And we still don't have his tax returns to shed light on whether or not his behavior is in some way benefiting his business ledgers. We know, already, that taxpayer money has been flowing to some of his businesses, like Mar-a-Lago. Yet, in spite of the public seeing their tax dollars flow directly into the Trump Organization, no one has stepped up to put a stop to it, despite the rules being laid out in the Constitution. How is he making money? And why isn't anyone doing anything about it? We'll get into it. First up, a look at how the spread and scope of Trump's businesses dealings. Trump's businesses. The Trump Organization has properties all around the world. Bluebeat 76 Getty Images. Trump claims to control more than 500 businesses in dozens of countries around the world. First of all, we have to touch on the Trump Organization. It's huge and has properties and business interests all over the world. The company is private, so we don't have a clear picture of exactly how big and valuable it is. But we do know that Trump promised to divest himself, or to walk away, from his business while in office. The main reason, of course, is to avoid conflicts of interest. For example, Trump wouldn't want to conduct a military operation in a city in which he owns valuable property. There is an innumerable number of potential scenarios, but this is an obvious one, given that Trump owns property in somewhat unstable countries. The problem, though, is that he hasn't divested. And he's still making money. Next, how is he profiting from the presidency? Making money in office. President Donald Trump takes frequent trips to Mar-a-Lago. Getty Images. Trump's businesses are benefiting from his family being in power, including his resorts like Mar-a-Lago and his D.C. hotel. Trump is using his position as president to promote his own business interests, which is the key issue here, and the problem that the framers intended to avoid. Examples include his numerous trips to his own resorts and properties like those in New Jersey and Florida, while charging Secret Service and transportation costs to the taxpayers. He also continues to sell merchandise. Foreign dignitaries are herded to Trump's D.C. hotel, and Trump wine is even being promoted from and by the White House. Even Ivanka Trump's merchandise has been unethically promoted by the administration. Next, why is this an issue? You'll have to go back to 1776. The problem: the president isn't supposed to profit from serving in the White House. Eric Thayer, Getty Images. The Emoluments Clause of the Constitution prohibits profiting from the presidency. Now, for a quick recap, why is this all a problem? Because it's against the rules. Trump, with his business interests in the back of his mind or forefront, is making decisions as the leader of the country, under the guise of what's best for the country. But he won't be in office forever, and he may be putting Trump Organization interests before the public interest. This, of course, is something that the courts will need to hash out. Is the public actually being harmed? Is there any proof that Trump is violating the Constitution? A slew of lawsuits seeks to answer those questions. The most maddening part: you, the taxpayer, are paying for Trump's defense. Next, the lawsuits. The lawsuits. Trump faces several lawsuits. Brian A. Jackson, Getty Images. Several lawsuits have been filed alleging the president is violating the Emoluments Clause. Oral arguments begin in January. Don't worry, the apparent Emoluments Clause violations haven't gone unnoticed. Several lawsuits are working their way through the courts. It appears pretty serious, too, as Trump businesses are being subpoenaed and ordered to preserve documents. There are 3 or 4 suits that have been filed, and the Trump administration has, naturally, asked that they are thrown out. Again, a judge will need to decide if he's actually run afoul of the law. But it seems that there are definitely some conflicts of interest at play. Which brings us to our next question: what is Trump's defense? Next, the Department of Justice has rushed to the president's defense. How exactly are they defending him? The defense taxpayers are funding Trump's defense. BurtonGetty Images. The main DOJ argument is that it's not unconstitutional for the president's private interests to earn profits while he or she serves, and that there is no damage to the public. As mentioned, you, the American taxpayer, are paying for Trump's defense. You are literally paying for lawyers to argue that Trump has a right to profit from the presidency. While that sinks in, we can get to the other burning question at hand, which is why Trump thinks he is in the right here. According to a report from USA Today, it boils down to this: the taxpayer-funded lawyers are making the case that it is not unconstitutional for the president's private companies to earn profits from foreign governments and officials while he's in office. Further, the government lawyers and Trump's private attorneys are making the same arguments, that the Constitution's ban on a president taking gifts from foreign interests in exchange for official actions does not apply to foreign government customers buying things from Trump's companies. The plaintiffs, including ethics groups and competing businesses, argue the payments pose an unconstitutional conflict of interest. Again, we'll have to wait for the courts to hash it all out. Next, will the courts let Trump get away with it? Will Trump get away with it? There isn't much legal precedent for this. Scott BurtonGetty Images. It's hard to predict, but nobody has seemed willing to step up and do anything. You can agree or disagree with the president's actions, but it's obvious that he's violating the spirit of law, at the very least. He himself promised to step away from his interests and didn't, implying that he knew he should have even before taking office. As for whether or not a court will drop the hammer on him, it's hard to say. There isn't much legal precedent in this area. President Obama had a brief spat with the law concerning his Nobel Peace Prize, but other than that, emoluments violations don't bubble up very often. Finally, the big question: what sort of example are we setting? Setting a dangerous precedent. We could see the same behavior from future presidents. Jim Watson, BurtonGetty Images. If the president's behavior isn't curbed, does it set a precedent for how we'll deal with similar situations in the future? It's more than just making sure the president acts in good faith while in office. The real issue here is establishing a precedent going forward. While we evidently appear willing, let him get away with anything he wants, including emoluments violations, what can we expect from future presidents? It's a test for the courts, of course, but also a test for what and how much the public is willing to put up with from our elected officials. If we don't put our foot down now, what happens when another more competent president proceeds to go out of bounds? Check out the cheat sheet on Facebook page 2. Everyone has secrets. It's not uncommon to have secrets in your personal life, but they can also cross over into your work life. Both coworkers and bosses are hiding things they would prefer no one to find out about. If you pause for a moment, you can probably come up with a handful of juicy tidbits you hope will never be uncovered. Your supervisor is no different. Here are 8 secrets your boss is keeping from you. 1. Your emails aren't private. GIPHY. Although you might feel comfortable at work, that feeling is a false sense of security. Roughly 73% of employers use technology tools to monitor email, and 40% have someone manually read and review email, according to research from the American Management Association. So if you're tempted to complain about your boss or the company in a work email, resist the urge. Some companies are even able to read emails you've saved but never sent, according to attorney Lisa Guerra in her column for Nolo. Also, be careful when it comes to social media. Many employers pay close attention to their employees' tweets and Facebook posts. 2. You're training your replacement. GIPHY. Sometimes when a new hire joins a company, you might be asked to show him or her the ropes. However, be aware of how much and what type of information you're being asked to share. If the newbie's duties seem very similar to your current role, it's possible you could be training your replacement. Obviously, your boss won't tell you that. He or she might say the new hire will be shadowing you or needs additional guidance. Some other clues you're being replaced are if the new hire is attending meetings in your place, your workload gets lighter, or you get a new, ambiguous title without a raise. 3. The company is stealing from you. GIPHY. You'd probably be shocked to learn some employers steal retirement contributions from their employees. In 2015, Employee Benefits Security Administration investigators recovered more than $4.9 million in retirement contributions that were stolen from employees. If your employer is a retirement account thief, your boss might know about it but choose to remain silent out of fear of losing his or her job. 4. You're going to be laid off. GIPHY. Is your employer facing tough financial times? You might have some idea things aren't going well, but some bosses won't say exactly how bad things are. Even if you're on the short list to get laid off, you likely won't hear about it until Human Resources tells you to hand in your work ID and clean out your desk. If office supplies are rationed, paychecks aren't arriving on time, and your boss has stopped making eye contact, you might want to start looking for another job. 5. Your boss has favorites, and he's besties with one of your coworkers. GIPHY. Sometimes being nice and working hard aren't good enough. Either your boss likes you or he doesn't. Part of the reason you might never be on excellent terms with your boss is because bosses sometimes play favorites. It's also not unusual for your boss to be close friends with one of your teammates. Approximately 4 in 10 workers, 39%, say they're friends with their boss, according to a Career Builder survey. 6. Your boss is keeping a close eye on your sick days. GIPHY. You might think no one knows you faked sick to get a day off from work, but most of the time your boss is on to you. Roughly 40% of employees admitted to calling in sick during the past year when they weren't, according to a Career Builder survey. This is up 5% from 2016. Bosses sometimes get suspicious if you develop a noticeable pattern when you call out sick. This is especially true if you have a habit of taking off Mondays or Fridays. The same survey also found approximately 38% of employers checked up on a sick worker, and 26% have fired someone after discovering a fake excuse was used. 7. Your boss is tolerating you until someone better comes along. GIPHY. Have you made several mistakes at work? Your days could be numbered. If you've been slipping up at work and you're still around, it's probably not because you're a nice person or your boss is very forgiving. If you're still employed after some major mistakes, your boss could secretly be looking to let you go. He or she might just be waiting for the right time, especially if you work in an office that's understaffed. 8. Your boss pays attention to what you wear. GIPHY. When you first interview for a new job, you try to look your best. However, after you've gotten through the interview process and you've been with your employer for a while, you might be tempted to push the limits and express yourself a little more through your outfits. Your best bet is to be careful when it comes to clothing choices. If you think your boss and coworkers don't care how you look at work, you're wrong. A Salary.com survey found 56% of respondents said they judge their coworkers based on how they dress. Follow Share Is on Twitter at ShareAsongo. Check out the cheat sheet on Facebook.